Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Afterparty, Season 1, Episode 4, Chelsea. In this episode, so Chelsea's POV is a bit thriller, a tiny bit almost feeling like a horror movie, actually. And overall, I find hers the most interesting so far. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. You guys have been enjoying this show so much, and I feel like this episode was the one that really cemented a few things for me that I hadn't been noticing so much. My dog's drinking is extremely loud. Forgive him. But there's a few beats that keep being hit and a few little tricks, and I know that this isn't really in the spirit of the thing, so I don't think I'm going to do this. However, if you've ever played Clue, you know that a big part of doing well with Clue is being organized with the evidence that you have seen so far and ruling things out, right? So if somebody mentions the same thing as somebody else, then that's likely closer to accurate. And I'm starting to kind of want to make a spreadsheet for this show where I put particular plot beats along the top, character lines down the side, or character POVs, and then I highlight the ones that certain characters actually bothered talking about, and seeing how often those plot beats seem to either align or not. And there's a lot of things that each person tends to leave out or change. Now, something that I'm noticing with this particular episode, and I really like this just from a psychology standpoint, every time that people are in their own POV and describing a scene, when we see that same scene from the POV of somebody else who was also there, an interesting thing happens. And what we usually get is the original POV where we saw something. The person telling us that story made themselves look more like they did the right thing in the moment than it turned out they did. And sometimes that's purposeful. Sometimes it's not. You know what I'm saying? I can't decide. But for example, in the POV with Anik, when he is with Zoe going down the hall to the cafeteria and they run into Chelsea. Chelsea spills her drink on Anik, and Anik is about to go and wash his shirt up when he notices how confrontational Chelsea is being with Zoe, and he decides to stay. In his POV, he mans up a little bit, realizes that Zoe is really uncomfortable, that there's something a little off about how Chelsea's acting, and senses this threat a little, and he sticks around despite the fact that he has just had wine spilled on him. When we see the same thing from Zoe's point of view, she is watching him clean his shirt up at the water fountain and talking to Zoe up close. And there's a whole conversation going on that, from Anik's perspective, we never see anything like an actual conversation. I am going with Chelsea's version of events on this one. I think that Anik didn't consider how much like conversation they had and didn't notice that like maybe by acting like he was there, it might not line up with things that Chelsea tells the detective. He just wanted to make himself look like he was being super considerate of Zoe, and that if she was uncomfortable, he wasn't okay with it and he was going to stay and like stick up for her. But Chelsea, I don't think, would just invent a whole conversation that she had with Anik. And if she had this conversation in front of him, he would have talked about it. So I believe that what she said is what happened. That he didn't take off to the bathroom. He just stuck around by the water fountain instead so that he could kind of deal with his shirt, but also not totally leave. And he is counting that as him like sticking around, but that's not really what he did. Similarly, the moment in Jasper's POV where he switches their drinks, he switches them back so that Anik is once again the one with the vodka. Now, I think that he just added this as a POV thing because he is taking it as a given that if Chelsea switched their drinks, she is trying to do something nefarious. And of course, he did the right thing in switching them back because he saw her do that. It seemed shady. And he was like, not on my watch. And so he put it into his POV how he did, a solid for his friend. But when we're in her POV, Jasper, I keep calling him that, Jasper, does not switch them back. And I can't tell whether or not that really went down that way. If it was just him saying I did the right thing when he in fact didn't, or if Chelsea just didn't spot him switching them back, and so it wasn't included in her telling of the story because she didn't see it and doesn't know that happened. So it could be that he didn't do it and she successfully got Anik to hydrate a little bit because she thinks he's a good guy. Or it could be that she tried to do what was right by him, but Anik wound up getting even drunker at that point than he was already. And I'm going to go ahead with Jasper's POV on this. Like, I think if he was watching out for Anik, and I know that it's a real sort of conflict here because I still think Jasper's the murderer, but I think he would switch it back because he would be feeling kind of like distrustful of Chelsea. So I also think that would lead to Anik being completely passed out the way that he was. She's trying to hydrate him and help him out. Jasper misunderstands and he does what he thinks helps his friend, but that leads to the guy being totally laid out. Or Jasper is trying to set Anik up. I don't want to believe that of him. I am willing to accept that Jasper had his own vendetta and that he was like trying to get away with killing Xavier, but I don't want to believe that he was planning for Anik to take the fall for him. If that turns out to be true, I will genuinely be heartbroken. I can forgive him wanting to exact revenge, but I am not like looking at him at all the same way. If he has a like black bud that he seems to fall all over and really support, and it turns out it was all because he was planning to frame him, like the energy of that is really different, and I just don't want that. So that's why I hesitate to even bring this up, but it is possible that Jasper was setting Anik up either to get even drunker because he wanted him to be so inebriated that it would seem his judgment was off, or if I'm being generous, he wanted Anik to get more drunk because he wanted him like out of the way for when it was time to commit the murder, and was actually trying to shield him from the police by giving him an alibi of being literally passed out in the middle of the floor where everybody could see him, so that nobody would ever think he killed this guy. And unfortunately, he decided as soon as he woke up and saw that he had been pranked, he decided to go upstairs to the guy's room, which is not something that Jasper necessarily would have been able to predict. So he was trying to help his friend, and it backfired because now it looks like he's the only one that was in the room at the time of the murder. I know I'm talking in circles here, and I'm not dealing with Chelsea's thing from the beginning. I swear I will, but there's just a lot of little things that I really wanted to talk about before I forgot them. So there's another thing here. At the end of the episode, when they are talking about Xavier's possible texting of Chelsea, she asks whether the police can check if he was the one texting her those threatening texts, because she's been getting them all night about how nobody wants her at the reunion. Can't you see that you aren't wanted here? You should leave or there will be trouble. And all of that, I was actually willing to put down to Zoe, because it's not any of it actually threatening her safety. It's all ominous sounding out of context. But if a woman whose husband you slept with is telling you, don't come to the reunion or there'll be trouble, that's just fucking common sense. That's just something that you would say because you don't want to deal with the drama of it to the woman who slept with your husband. It's not like Zoe's saying, I'm going to kill you if you come to the reunion. It's, don't fucking dare you. And honestly, that was sort of the energy of a lot of them right up until the text of a photo of her from behind with the skulls and crossbones and whatnot, the emojis all over it, which is honestly the most hilarious way to threaten somebody, is to put death emojis all over their picture. But that's the only thing that really seemed to point to, I want to do you physical harm. Everything else really seemed to me like just somebody who doesn't want to deal with you. It's not a threat so much as a please make this easier on both of us and don't do this. So when she brings this up, the detective says that his phone was not on his person. And I've already said that I feel like Jasper sent himself that text about going to the studio. I stand by that, but I also will say anybody who knew what Jasper was there for could have stolen X's phone and used it and sent everybody a variety of texts and made it look like it was coming from Xavier. So it does sort of align with my theory about Jasper, but it could also apply to anybody. So it's not conclusive by any means. It's just something I noticed. The other thing that occurred to me in this episode, because I've been thinking about Jasper's whole deal with the installing of the AV thing. I was thinking about how he told, when he was at the reunion still, and he's catching up with Xavier and talking to him about the installment that he did. Xavier tells him that the remotes don't really work right. And I am wondering if Jasper installed things wrong on purpose. Did something weird on purpose. It's sort of treated in the moment like a bit of a goof on how Jasper is bragging, but isn't that good at his job, actually. I'm sort of wondering if it's, meant to sort of disarm us how amiable he seems, but there was a plan right from the start of installing this stuff. And I also, the fact that he installed everything, is it possible that he's controlling stuff using Xavier's phone? Was there a Bluetooth hookup there where you could control anything in particular, and accessing it through his phone would give you the override that you need? Because it really does seem like Xavier was alone in his room when whatever happened to him to make him go over the balcony happened. And there is every possibility that something was automated and that it was like, you know, not necessarily a person standing there shoving him over the edge, but that something moved and caused him to fall, or I don't know. So the fact that this, like, I just feel like there is something about the AV system in the house that is part of the core of his murder, and the phone could possibly be a big factor there. It also could not matter at all. Somebody else may have taken his phone and sent Jasper that text to get Jasper into a certain place at a certain time. And that might be where we saw him, like, you know, saying, I'm about to make musical history. That was him genuinely responding to Xavier's text, thinking that, oh, sweet, we're about to do this. And maybe he still did set something up with the AV, but it just doesn't require a phone to activate. So let's actually begin this here, because it is a really, really fun episode. I loved the thriller aspect of it. And the way that she starts things off, like we have a distraction that Jasper makes for Anique so that Anique can sneak into the room and listen in on the interrogation. Jasper says that I saw a silhouette in the the beach house or the pool house, something like that, which it turns out is used as merch storage. And when they go in there, the detective, like, she is holding a prop sword and the lights go on and there's like a cutout that has like an automation so that it's Xavier speaking. He's saying something like, there's a booze that he made called sex, I think, but he's just like, drink sex responsibly. Don't drink it if you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant. But anyway, she spins and cuts the cutout's head off, to which Jasper very rightfully is like, you didn't know that was a cutout at first. And she's like, yeah, keep that in mind. And I was like, fucking cops. This is always the way. Sword first, questions later. But anyway, while they're doing that, Anique sneaks into the room, and then we've got Chelsea coming in and immediately being like, you have clearly decided whether or not I am guilty, so why don't you just fucking arrest me? And the detective is like, girl, this is your chance to convince me you didn't do it, so why don't you just do that? Oh my god, I forgot about how Anique stumbles across, I don't know if that's a clarinet or an oboe, but some instrument, a wind instrument, that makes him think that Xavier was going to try for a serious album. And I really loved that, like, disgust on his face with that. So Chelsea explains hers starts off with, everybody comes to a high school reunion for a reason. And this should have been a victory lap for me. I was top of the social food chain in senior year, and I had a bright future, but then things happened with Xavier. Her wording is, because of him, everything changed. My friends turned on me. They hated me. My life spiraled into an abyss of misery and isolation. And 15 years later, I was here to get... 15 years later, my friends still hated me and thought I was toxic and crazy. And I love somebody just comes and knocks on the window of her car to just tell her that Xavier's here. And I love that all they do is knock on the car. That's it. But because she's so keyed up, she reacts completely unreasonably and just yells at the guy like, what the fuck, are you crazy? When he literally very gently tapped the window. It's like, outside of her, understanding of things, it's really nothing. But in her state right now, it's like a fucking attack. here it is. She says, I came to get revenge. And we come back to the present, and the detective is like, yeah, okay, but see, you're really just telling me that you came for revenge. Like, okay, so explain then. And I'm going to just cut to the chase here. We do not find out what Xavier did to her at the St. Patrick's Day party. So I don't know if we're ever going to find out. And it's just going to kind of be like one of those things, like almost like a MacGuffin that we don't ever get to see. You just know she has a vendetta against him, but you aren't sure what it is. And it's because it doesn't really matter. But I'm really, I thought being in her point of view, we'd get to see it. I am starting to think we are going to hear about it from one of the Jennifers, because they're clearly very gossipy. And I'm wondering if Chelsea just didn't have the heart to talk about it, but one of the Jennifers will be feeling free to like spill all about it. But anyway, when she comes in, the Jennifers are really fake nice. It's so uncomfortable. I love how she keeps like leaning into how unhappy she is and isn't trying to hide that, and is like, you know, Jennifer is like, well, it's weird that you came to the like 15th reunion. Is Xavier being here why you're here? And she tries to like, she says, well, I'm not a fan, but he is why I'm here tonight. And she gets very like deadpan, and they both just sort of go, okay, let's get you a name tag. And she takes 1 million drink tickets. I don't know if these are something that you're normally like paying for, but she grabs like 30 and just walks away. And apparently that's fine. As she's walking away, one of the Jennifers says, love you, babe. And I was just so grossed out. Like, I just don't really like casual love yous between people who aren't super close to begin with. Like, I want to mean it. And people who just toss it, like it's just not actually saying anything. Like it's just a greeting. I don't know. No. So she goes to get a bunch of vodka, and that's where she starts to wonder if she's being followed. And she sees somebody like sticking out from the back of one of those like curtains. And it turns out this was Brett, and he's hiding because he's spying on Xavier and on Zoe, and he isn't supposed to be here. But she thinks that he's there for her. And this is what I really liked about her point of view, is that what it comes down to is that most of what she's worked up about isn't about her, but she thinks it is. Frankly, that's what a lot of the POV like stuff is we all contextualize things to be about us. But here it's really a lot more central to her understanding of the world. With everyone else, it's happening as sort of a matter of course. But with her, it's because she's specifically really paranoid about somebody threatening her that she is on alert in a way that the other characters haven't been. So it's really fascinating, actually, to see how many things she takes as an attack or a slight on her that truly didn't have anything to do with her and weren't directed at her at all. But because she is reframing exactly how it went down in her memory, it turns into something that's all about her. So she walks up to Brett, and they go into the like photo booth thing together. And we have a pretty fun bit here where they are posing for the photos that automatically flash in between a pretty heated argument. And it turns out that the two of them had an affair. And she says something to him about how he put his pet's end of life care in her hands. And I was like, what? And then it turns out she is the receptionist for a veterinarian. Now, she said that at the beginning, but I took this to be her, like, and Brett having such a close relationship that he was like, you know what I'm saying? But he says, had I known you were going to seduce me, I would have found somewhere else to bring Dumpling to put her to sleep, rest assured. And I was like, oh, okay. She says, you were a cheater. You initiated this. I was just like, hi. And he says, no, you were like, hi. And they have a little bit more of an argument about taking care of Dumpling and whether or not it was going to be like, you know, there was something that he could have done. We come back to the present and the detective is like, all right, so you guys had an affair, but I got to tell you, I'm not supposed to, but I will tell you, Brett never said a single word about this. And meanwhile, Anik is hiding in the closet and he is sending text updates to Jasper about everything. And I am cringing because of my suspicions of Jasper. I just don't want Anik to be telling him jack shit. I don't want him. I don't know that anything that he tells him can help or hurt at this point. It's just a principle. Don't tell that motherfucker nothing. But he is, because he trusts him. Jasper begins texting back, which is making all this noise. And Anik is out here just like wrapping his like chin and hands around his phone to smother the sound. And I'm like, there's literally just a switch you can flip to turn to silent on the side of your phone, dude. Like, I really feel like Anik would know that. That was a weird moment that didn't seem in character to me. But whatever. So, I really do have to like speed things up. I front loaded the episode with my things that I noticed in comparison to other episodes, but I have to get through. So basically what Chelsea says is that her and Brett hooked up because his pet had just died and she was going through a breakup and she was really like commiserating with anybody who had something tragic happening in their life. And she tries to basically say, I didn't do anything wrong. It's like, she says here, just like everything else, it was my fault. I ruined a happy family. But she's saying it like, I can't believe people are seeing it like this. It seems really clear she doesn't feel like she has any say in her life, which is what makes the conversation later with Jasper much more, it's a lot more correct to Jasper's like idea of his interpretation than I thought it would be. I thought we would see from her point of view and she would just be like, oh my God, you know, thank you for telling me this, dude. Why don't you go and chew somebody else's ear off? I literally don't care. But it turns out that they actually did connect and he was talking to her about something very specific that's like just what she needed to hear at the moment. So at this point, her and Brett leave the photo booth and she bumps into Xavier. And despite never finding out exactly what he did to her on St. Patrick's Day, he is clearly feeling very guilty about something. And he tries to be like, oh my God, it's been such a long time. It's like such a long time that it's like, oh, probably who even remembers anything about that time? It's so far back, you know? And she's like, oh yeah, no, not me. I don't remember. And he's like, oh, great. Same page. But then we have, you know, her saying, well, we really should catch up. And finally, later at the after party, she really corners him. So we'll get there. But at this point, she's thinking about how she's going to get Xavier alone. And so she needs him to trust her. She says hi to Ned, who just says, I'm married and very fulfilled, and clearly does not know how to handle her at all. And there was something about how everybody approached her with this sort of nervousness, like she's a dog that's known to have bitten somebody before, that really got to me. Like, it was a sort of thing that, again, you can't tell whether it's imagined or if people were really treating her like this. But I'm willing to bet some of this was there based on how I saw people thinking of Chelsea and talking about her. So anyway, I really enjoy there's a lot of little like thriller moments throughout this episode as well, where you've got tropes that they sort of like don't pay off, which I actually found really, really fun. So the first one is way at the beginning. She goes to like wipe the condensation, or I think it's actually rain, off of her car window, but because it's outside the window, nothing happens. So it's like this normally a moment that's supposed to be really visually satisfying, and it just doesn't do anything. Then there is a point in the bathroom where she tries to call the person who's been texting her in order to like confront them. And in a different version of this story, the phone would start ringing in the bathroom with her. It would be like a scary movie situation. But this time, it just goes to this, like, number is no longer in service, which I was really, really weird. I don't know how you do that. I'm assuming that's part of, like, the, burner text thing that the detective's talking about later regarding cyberbullying and how people can, like, pull that off really easily. Also, I love that one of the threatening texts, they use the wrong "your," and so the next text is them correcting their mistake and using the correct "your" with an asterisk. That is a great joke, and I just want them to know that I appreciated it. I fully saw it and I fully appreciated it. So okay, this is when Indigo comes in trying to get her to sell, I think, Herbalife. She gets the hell up out of there, and they have the conversation about the child beauty queens who killed each other. They sent text messages that were anonymous back and forth to each other all the time, but they talked in their twin language. You really couldn't understand a lot of it, but it was some nasty stuff. What? I'm sorry. Tarabelle and Crystal Ann Ruffins were their names. What? Like, excuse me? I just really want to know more about what that story was going to be. So, this is when we have the moment with her running into Zoe and Xavier. She tries to have like a conversation with Zoe, confronting her about whether she's the one who sent her the text. Zoe says, "No, and I just don't want to have anything to do with you," leaves, and she's getting followed the whole time by, it turns out, Walt, who found her car keys and is attempting to return them to her. She runs into Brett. I love the moment where she's talking about being followed, and she stops and looks at Brett and says, "It's you." And he's like, "I'm right in front of you. How could I be following you?" And she has a brief moment of like, okay, I'm definitely overthinking things here. It doesn't last. It's just in the moment of being really asked, "Ma'am, how would that even work?" that she sort of stops and is like, okay, fair question. It would not. So this is when we have her directly saying, because the detective says, "What are you trying to get back at him for?" And I'm wanting her to tell the St. Patrick's Day story. She doesn't. She says, "For making my life the pile of shit that it is right now, for kicking off my downward spiral, all traced back to that St. Patrick's Day party." And again, don't find out about it, but she is laying everything about her life at his feet. And it's really unreasonable. Like, there's simply no way any one person can completely ruin things unless they have inflicted like a really specific trauma on you. And based on the tone of this, I don't think that's what this is. Anyway, so this is when she gets her keys from Walt. I fucking love Jasper walking up, not recognizing Walt. She doesn't know Walt's name. And Jasper just like sort of pushes him aside and is like, "Was that the valet guy?" But anyway, they get in the car together. She does mention Anik getting hit by the car, I want to say, because once again, Jasper just didn't say anything about that. I can't really blame him. Like, it's clear a lot of what he wants to do is just pretend that never even happened. And it's not like factored in at all to Anik's passing out either, which I do kind of worry about head trauma there, but it may not be that. Who knows? But this is when Jasper is trying to be encouraging and saying like, oh, we're going to fix everything at this after party, right? And they're looking at each other when he hits Anik. So then we have them heading to the after party. I really want to point out once again, the wild chase, not in her POV. So what I am going to get, because Jasper does not mention the wild chase. She doesn't mention the wild chase. The only people who mention it are Anik, who is very worried about Brett, and Brett himself, who was desperate to get that stuffed animal back, koala, and wanted to make himself seem like a badass, while Anik was very sure he was being like targeted for an attack. So I am going to say that there was some urgency from Anik, but nothing like what he portrayed as an all-out chase. And probably most of the actual chasing was on Brett's side, because he seems like the kind of guy that would love any excuse to drive like a fucking maniac. I just think it's really surprising, because if you're going to pretend somebody is after you, and I say pretend, I think she believes it, but if you are in the headspace that you believe somebody's after you, I would think a chase would be an ideal time to really indulge that fantasy. So the fact that she doesn't mention it at all, to me, really, I feel like it just didn't happen the way Anik is saying. So this is when she finds out, when Anik finds out that she had loaded up her flask with cat roofies, that she was going to give them to Xavier, take naked photos of him, and leak them on TMZ, which eventually, when she does talk to Xavier and admits to him what she had been going to do, he tells her that he's already leaked photos of himself like that, and I was cackling. Because honestly, my thought when she described this was, if anything, I feel like he would enjoy that. Like, this is a man who really doesn't see negative attention. It just doesn't exist for him. And I think that he would enjoy getting to whine about how his privacy was violated and be a victim. And he would enjoy that he's young and buff and probably looks great naked, and there would be a lot of compliments flying around about it, you know? But yeah, so it turns out that was what Anik was drinking out of her flask. And the detective is like, you drugged him. And she says he drugged himself on accident. Again, the theme with her is dodging responsibility about things. And she says it was really only a sip. He's kind of a lightweight. So back to the party. And again, with this like heavy sense of everybody is watching me, she tries to switch things with water, and it looks like it works from her point of view. And I have to assume that Jasper, like, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and said that he was the correct POV about switching it. But I'm also thinking now Chelsea would know if she slammed down what turns out to be water instead of vodka. And she doesn't mention that. So I don't know. So yeah, this is when we get the funniest line, in my opinion, of the whole episode. She is saying, Jasper's on his phone, totally checked out. She is saying to Anik, I have to like finish what I started. I came here for a reason. Anik says, I know what you're up to. And she's gets a little bit like twitchy and is like, you do? And he says, yup, you're going to poop. You're a party pooper. And she says, yeah, you got me. I'm going to take a big poop. Okay. And she walks away and he says, and now I know a secret. With such sincerity. You guys, I laughed so suddenly and so loud. Like that killed me. I cracked up. What an amazing line delivery. What a great, like, you know, a line that definitely does seem highly suspicious out of context, but in context, because he's fucking like stoned, makes total sense still and is so silly and funny. Oh my God, that was pure inspiration. Whoever wrote that, like a million high fives. That's so good. So this is when she's like, most of the time when she's in the party itself, everybody's got background noise. And this is another thing that I sort of want to go back and rewatch the other ones just to see. I probably will go back and watch with Owen. But she always kind of has the two Jennifers and their conversations going on the loudest in the hubbub of the ambiance. And I really enjoy that because they would be the ones that would grind on her the most. But they're talking shit about her and she is right there. They don't realize it. One of them said she's really not in a good place, like drinking, drugs, fish concerts, and porn addiction. That's why she got off Facebook. And did you see her hair? It looks like she made out with a tornado. And this is when she jumps in and says, it's just Jewish hair. That's all. That explains its texture. And I really appreciated this because honestly, when she's like, did you see her hair? My immediate knee-jerk response was like, oh, don't you fucking bring her hair up, bitch. Like, as somebody with extremely curly hair, the snide things that were said, especially in the 90s when having stick straight hair was the style, I really have like a sort of almost like a trigger with that. And I was so delighted that she chimes in to be like, hey, how about you don't just be racist about my hair texture? How about you just don't? So much volume. It's great. We love the Jews. Oh my God. So this is when Brett shoves shoves Anik. The two of them, you know, another text. And this is the one where there's the emojis. I swear to God, that's so funny. And she is beginning to really sort of hyperventilate. And I love when she starts looking around and turning. Normally in these movies, if they turned very suddenly, there was somebody that had been standing right behind them. But as they turn, that person moves away and we have the tension of knowing a person had been right there, but they just missed them. Here, she's turning and she thinks she just missed somebody, but there wasn't anybody there. This is a moment where she begins to think everybody is talking about her and that they're standing back in a circle looking at her and mocking her, laughing at her. She's such a bitch. I can't believe she came. One of them does say, I love her shoes though. And then all of a sudden it sort of pulls back and it turns out they're gathered around watching Ned draw on Anik. They weren't laughing at her. She just happened to be standing there and thought it was directed at her. And that was not what was going on. She feels really bad about Anik getting drawn on because it was her fault. She's the one who wrote, I'm sorry on his hand. And then again, she's like, it was time to handle what I came here for and finish it before someone finished me. And we get an arrow flying past her into the forehead of the poster, which I had forgotten that was there. So I don't know what the significance of that is. We don't find out who did this. It's just like a weird thing that happens in this POV, and I'm willing to bet it was Ned, because he seems like the kind of guy who would do something idiotic, like fuck around with a bow and arrow at a party. But I don't know. So this is when Jasper chimes in with her, and he is talking about how he's going to like do something amazing with music tonight. And she says, I had plans tonight too, but they didn't pan out. So I'm going to head out. And he says, stop. Listen, if there's anything that I learned tonight, it's this. You don't just get one shot in life. You've got to take that second shot. Carpe the hell out of that DM. She says, no, it's too late. No. You want to know why? Because you're in control, Chelsea. Nobody else. You got this. I think I just needed to hear that once in my damn life. I'm in control. Maybe I've always been in control. Thank you, Jasper. And he says, did I inspire you? And she says, I mean, fully. Can I write a song about this? Don't use my name. You got it. Okay. It's kind of a nice moment, honestly. I was like, oh, so he didn't just completely inflate himself. Like, that happened. Lovely. So this is when X comes in and he's like, X marks the spot. Am I right? Because I'm X and this is my spot. And I was like, this is interesting because I think it was Jasper's POV. All he said was Xavier mentioning it's time to party, but not this opening. He says, all right, but for real, big ups to Hillmont High. We started at the upper middle and now we're here. And I really enjoyed that in multiple ways. It's like a fun joke about, middle school, but it's also like about class. The whole thing is very funny. I head back to LA tomorrow for the Kids' Choice Awards, but for night, Mikasa is, you know how the rest of that goes. Oh my God, he's such a doof. So she manages to get him to come upstairs with her. He tries making all of these excuses, which she does not accept. And she finally corners him. She gives him the flask, and it looks like he's about to drink out of it, despite there being some suspicion in him. And she finally admits, that's full of cat tranquilizers, don't drink it. He's like, so you're still pissed about the party, right? And she says, yeah, you fucked me over. After that party, I was stranded. Everyone thought I was a crazy, lying monster. Even I believed it eventually. Till I started making these trash choices. Till I had this trash life. And I blamed you for all of it. And when he says I didn't mean it, she says, I don't want your apology. Now that I'm here, I actually just need to know that you know that you're an asshole and a douche. And I found this really interesting. That she has this moment of him seemingly being prepared to admit he knows that he's the one who fucked her life up. But even though he's willing to take that and here she has come to enough of a realization herself that she doesn't need him to do that anymore. And when he nods and says that he is an asshole and a douche, she needs him to say it out loud. And I love this because he says it and he whispers it really barely and looks super uncomfortable. And then she says, I need you to sing it now. And this is, I think, my favorite of his performances in this show so far, because he has to simultaneously be looking guilty and scared and uncomfortable and really keep a straight face, because this is hysterically funny, but it's absolutely unfunny to him. And it's a really difficult thing, I would imagine, to pull off singing I'm an asshole and a douche in this goofy ass way, but make it seem like you were just forced to do something unthinkable. Like it was just, I loved his whole vibe in this. It's so funny. He's so uncomfortable. And she says, I really don't need anything more from you after that. And he goes to drink out of the flask again. And she's like, no, seriously, don't. Just go pour it out. So he goes to the balcony at this point. And when he goes over, I notice that he does turn it and dump, but they find the flask down there. So I guess he eventually just like chucks the whole thing. And as she's walking out of his room, she stops and looks in the mirror and gives herself a bit of a smile. And this was one of the things that I didn't notice, but I think may be true of each episode. The characters always stop and look in the bedroom mirror as they're leaving. I don't know if that, I know that it happened with Brett. I know that Anik looks in the mirror because he sees the writing all over his face. I can't remember if Jasper looks in the mirror. I really don't recall. I feel like he wasn't, like he was, did Jasper even go to Xavier's room? I can't remember. But I'm pretty confident that this is like kind of a major like period at the end of the sentence for a lot of them. So we come back to the present. And the detective is asking if there was a blonde wig involved at all with what she was doing with Xavier. And she's like, no, what a weird and specific question. She goes back downstairs in her retelling and she runs into Zoe and we get a very funny scene. This actually cracked me up. She goes up to Zoe and says, I want you to know I'm really, really sorry. And I have made a lot of bad choices in my life, but this one was certainly the worst one. It was gross and wrong, and I totally regret it. And I really love this, you guys. And then she starts to say it wasn't even worth it because Brett is, and there's this long pause. And Zoe says, bad at sex. You can say it. Brett is bad at sex. The sex with him is a rush to the finish line. Yeah, I'm like, this is not a sport. And then just like the constant high fives. Who won here? What are you high-fiving anyone for? No, we lost. Yeah, big time. I was surprised he didn't work in construction because it felt like he was trying to like destroy a sidewalk. And then wraps with, you deserve better. You deserve a lot. And it's a strange time for me to be making comments about your love life, but Anik is a really, really good guy and seems to be somebody who has his shit together. And I love this scene. The two of them commiserating on how bad the sex was with this guy. I really feel for Zoe too. Like being stuck in a marriage with somebody who's bad at sex. I have to assume they had sex before they got married. So she went into it knowing fully that he was no good at it. But damn. And this moment where they get interrupted with how great is this party, it causes them all to like snap and look towards the TVs because they have all, gone off at the same time. The sound of this startles Anik awake, who's on the ground with all the beer all over him. So when Anik moves and knocks everything over, that's an extra huge distraction. So I don't know if that's planned that way or if it just worked out in that way. But he is looking around saying, where am I? Why am I wet? And it's a really nice, like, after just having said he has his shit together, for him to be such a mess that he was completely unconscious and being drawn on. It's a pretty good bit. So he is struggling here. And I'm going to say that when we come in, we don't see it. When we come in after he has woken up, I don't think there are sweatpants on the floor near him. Well, maybe there are. Maybe Jasper actually did put sweatpants. It's hard for me to tell what that piece of clothing is, but I'm gonna assume those are the sweatpants he laid over him. And this is when he says Xavier did this, and Chelsea tells him maybe it's the night to just let go and move on. And he says, this isn't the past. It's still happening, but not anymore. And he goes upstairs. We hear the scream. So, just again, Jasper jumps into this whole thing after he has woken up, and everybody was looking in a different direction. It is very possible that Jasper was upstairs shoving him off a balcony and then ran into the room a second later. Granted, the stairs are behind them to go to the bedroom, but I would think there would be either another way to get down, or it could be that he was just somewhere activating an automated thing to shove him off. I don't know. And she mentions that the threatening texts stopped coming in when Xavier was killed. Maybe it was him. And that's when the detective tells her his phone wasn't on his person. And we then get this major moment where she's about to say what happened at the St. Patrick's Day party. And she says it was a big night for all of this. And oh my God, Anik. And just as she says that, she seems to realize that she was about to fuck up and goes, no, I was just like, oh my God, eek. And the detective is like, okay, Culp, get Anik in here right now. And Anik, I will say, isn't at all look like, he doesn't have the expression on his face when she first mentions his name that makes me think what she was about to share about him is earth-shattering. More oh God, I really never wanted to talk about this again, and now I'm going to have to deal with it. I feel like her feeling bad is much more just about embarrassing him, and not because she really thinks that he is going to be suspected of murder even more now, although it could also be that. She says, I misspoke. Please leave him out of this. He's a good guy. And the detective says, you said that he woke up and said Xavier did this to him again. And she's like, yeah. So was the first time at that party? She doesn't get a chance to answer. Culp comes in to tell her we can't find Anik. And she, at this point, having lost Jennifer too, is like, where the fuck is everybody going? Go find him. And I mean, really, look, you're acting like this place is a fucking 2-bedroom, and I need you to look in every goddamn room. And the episode ends with Anik starting to struggle to get up because he needs to put himself somewhere that he can be found without anybody seeing him walk out of this room specifically and know what he was doing in there. I almost thought that he might just stand up right there and be like, I'm right here. I was trying to listen in. I'm sure it would look very bad for him, but I also can't help but wonder if you are listening, if you were the murderer, what would that even help you with if you were, you know what I mean? So I guess probably it would be so that if they question you again, you can get your story to sort of line up more with what everybody is saying, or that you can pretend that you were there for something that you weren't by describing it based on what you heard from someone else. But yeah, so that's how it ends. And it was a really, really fun episode. I enjoyed this a lot. It was really the episode that made me stop and go, this show is really fucking good. And there are times where somebody will choose for me to cover a show, and there's a sense for me of they want me to cover this simply because it brings up some interesting conversations socially or psychologically. But this show really lends itself to being hyper-analyzed, and that's so much fun. It's rare for me to get to watch a show that I think that's the point, you're meant to do that. And it's really fun to watch something that I think every choice that's made is on purpose for a reason. And that just makes it very, very compelling to watch and to talk about. And I love this. This is a really cool experience doing it this way. So, yeah, I'm having a great time here. Thank you again, Max, for commissioning this. I hope everybody listening is enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.